The first bark cut through the howling Montana wind like a knife. Sheriff Ethan Miller glanced at his German shepherd in the rearview mirror. Scout's ears suddenly alert, body rigid with tension. Snow pelted the windshield of his patrol vehicle as visibility dropped to mere feet. 8-year-old Maddie sat silent in the back seat, eyes wide as Scout barked again. More urgent this time. "What is it, boy?" Ethan murmured, slowing the truck. That's when he saw it. The faint orange glow through the curtain of white. Scout whined, scratching frantically at the window. As Ethan pulled over, the smell hit him. Burning rubber, gasoline. A sedan half buried in snow, flames licking up its hood. He squinted through the blizzard. Something moved inside. No, someone. "Stay here," he ordered Maddie, though she rarely moved without Scout anyway. Racing toward the wreckage. The cold forgotten, Ethan saw it. A small hand pressed against a window, and the glint of what couldn't possibly be chains. A child's face appeared, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a scream he couldn't hear over the storm. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. River Creek. Montana had once been nothing more than a dot on the map, a place where travelers stopped for gas before continuing toward Glacier National Park. The town sat nestled in a valley surrounded by towering pines and mountains that turned purple at dusk. Main Street featured the essentials: a diner, hardware store, small sheriff's office, and a church where most of the town's 3,000 residents gathered on Sundays. It was a kind of place where folks still brought casseroles when someone fell ill and children played unsupervised until the streetlights flickered on. But like many small towns with picture-perfect facades, River Creek harbored shadows beneath its neighborly veneer. Whispers traveled through church pews about missing donation money, and certain topics fell silent when Mayor Holloway entered the diner for his morning coffee. Ethan Miller hadn't been born in River Creek. He arrived 3 years ago with an 8-month-old Maddie and wounds that weren't all visible. The townspeople knew he'd served overseas in some capacity he never discussed, and that his wife's death had left him sole caretaker of a daughter who'd stopped speaking shortly after her mother's passing. They respected his quiet competence as sheriff, even if some found his directness off-putting. Ethan's cabin sat on the outskirts of town, backing up to national forest land. It was nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, an open kitchen, living area with a stone fireplace, and a wraparound porch where he drank coffee at dawn while Scout patrolled the perimeter. The walls displayed Maddie's artwork alongside photographs of a smiling woman with Maddie's same curly brown hair. Jessica Miller, 3 years gone. Scout wasn't just a pet. The German shepherd had been trained first as a military service dog, then retrained to support Maddie's needs. The bond between child and dog ran so deep. Scout anticipated Maddie's meltdowns before they happened and provided pressure therapy when the world became too overwhelming. While Maddie no longer spoke words, she communicated through a language of gestures that Scout and Ethan had learned to interpret with careful attention. Dr. Sarah Thompson had been the one to suggest Scout, the only person besides Deputy Tom Winters whom Ethan considered a friend in River Creek. She ran the medical clinic with quiet efficiency and never pushed Maddie to speak during their weekly check-ins. The therapy session had run late. Dr. Willis, Maddie's specialist from the neighboring county, had wanted to discuss new communication techniques, and Ethan had lost track of time. Now they were driving home through the worst snowstorm of the season, the shortest day of the year, already surrendering to darkness at barely 4 in the afternoon. "We'll be home soon, Firefly," Ethan said, glancing at Maddie in the rearview mirror. She stared out the window, one hand buried in Scout's thick fur, her expression unreadable. The dog lay protectively beside her, always vigilant, always watching. The therapist had reported small progress today. Maddie had drawn a picture of their family, including Jessica. It was the first time she'd drawn her mother since the funeral, and Scout's bark pierced the quiet. Ethan's military instincts immediately heightened his senses. The German shepherd never barked without cause. Ethan pulled the truck to the shoulder, snow crunching beneath the tires. Through the passenger window, down the embankment, orange flames created an eerie glow against white snow. His heart hammered as he grabbed his flashlight and the emergency kit he kept behind the seat. "Lock the doors," he instructed Maddie, knowing Scout wouldn't let her follow. "I'll be right back." The snow reached mid-calf as he trudged down the slope, each step punching to the crust into powder beneath. The sedan had gone nose first into a ditch, its back wheels still partly on the road. Flames had engulfed the engine compartment, leaking toward the cabin. Through the driver's side window, Ethan could make out a slumped figure, an adult male, unmoving, blood coating the side of his face. He tried the door, locked. Using his flashlight, he broke the window, reached in to check for a pulse, and found none. The smell of alcohol was unmistakable. This hadn't just been poor weather conditions. Then he heard it, a whimper from the back seat, shining his light through the smoke-filled interior. Ethan's blood ran cold. A small figure huddled on the floor behind the driver's seat. Not just huddled, restrained. Metal glinted in the flashlight beam. Chain links wrapped around delicate wrists, secured to the metal frame beneath the front seat. "I'm Sheriff Miller," he called. "I'm going to get you out." The back door was locked from the inside with child safety locks. The front passenger door was crushed against a tree. Smoke thickened as flames spread across the hood. There wasn't time to call for backup. Ethan smashed the rear window with his flashlight, clearing the glass with his sleeve. The child, a girl he could see now, looked up with enormous eyes, terrified beyond tears. Her clothes were dirty, her hair matted. The chains prevented her from reaching the window. "Cover your face," he shouted as he climbed halfway through the window. The heat was becoming unbearable, the smoke choking. His fingers fumbled with the chains, finding them secure with a padlock. No key in sight. He pulled his service weapon, instructed the girl to turn away, and shot the chain where it connected to the frame. The noise was deafening in the enclosed space. The girl flinched but didn't scream. Ethan holstered his weapon and pulled her toward him, her body terrifyingly light in his arms. As he backed out through the window, flames reached the dashboard. He cradled her against his chest and ran, snow flying around his boots, lungs burning with exertion and smoke. They were 20 yards away when the gas tank ignited with a thunderous boom, sending a fireball into the night sky. At the truck, Scout barked frantically, and Maddie's pale face pressed against the window. Ethan unlocked the door, placing the girl carefully on the back seat beside his daughter. "It's okay," he told her, though it clearly wasn't. "You're safe now." Under the dome light, he could see her clearly for the first time. 12, maybe 13 years old, with tangled blonde hair and hollowed cheeks. Beneath the dirt and terror, she had delicate features that reminded him painfully of Jessica. The chain still dangled from her wrists, raw skin visible beneath the metal. Ethan radioed dispatch. "This is Sheriff Miller. I need an ambulance at mile marker 22 on Highway 91. I've got a juvenile female, possible kidnapping victim. One adult male DOA at the scene. Vehicle fire. Over." While waiting for the response, he grabbed his emergency blanket and first aid kit. The girl didn't flinch when he wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, but her eyes never left his face, as if assessing whether he represented safety or just another danger. Maddie, typically wary of strangers, scooted closer to the girl. With solemn care, she took the edge of the blanket and tucked it more securely around the newcomer. Scout, ever attuned to Maddie's emotions, gently laid his head on the seat between them. In the rear-view mirror, Ethan watched as Maddie slowly reached for the girl's chained hand, her touch featherlight on the stranger's bruised fingers. It was the first time he'd seen his daughter willingly touch anyone besides himself or Scout since Jessica died. "Help is coming," Ethan promised softly. "You're going to be all right." The girl stared back, eyes haunted beyond her years, clearly not believing him. The fluorescent lights of River Creek Medical Center cast harsh shadows across the waiting room where Ethan sat, his uniform still smelling of smoke. Maddie had fallen asleep against his shoulder, Scout vigilant at their feet. Down the hall, behind closed doors, Dr. Sarah Thompson was examining the girl they'd found, the girl who still hadn't spoken a single word. Dr. Thompson emerged, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, lines of exhaustion creasing her forehead. "Can we talk privately?" Deputy Tom Winters, who'd arrived to take Ethan's statement, nodded toward Maddie. "I'll keep an eye on her, Chief." Ethan followed Dr. Thompson to a small consultation room. his boots heavy on the linoleum floor. She's malnourished, dehydrated, and has multiple contusions in various stages of healing, Sarah said without preamble. The marks on her wrists are consistent with long-term restraint. There are cigarette burns on her lower back. Ethan's jaw tightened. Sexual assault? No evidence of that. Thank God. But this isn't a one-time incident. Ethan, this child has been systematically abused. Any ID on her? Missing persons match? Sarah shook her head. Nothing. No identification on her or in the vehicle. The man, John Doe for now, had no ID either. She hasn't spoken, not even to tell me her name. The chains? Ethan asked. We had to cut them off. I've bagged them for evidence. She hesitated. There's something else. When I was examining her, she kept drawing these. Sarah slid a hospital notepad across the desk. On it were crude drawings of a large house with columns and stick figures with angry faces. Mean anything to you? Before Ethan could respond, the door opened. Mayor Richard Holloway stood there, his imposing frame filling the doorway. Silver hair immaculately styled despite the late hour. Behind him hovered Leonard Pike, head of the town council. I heard we have a situation, Holloway said, his voice carrying the smooth authority that had won him 5 terms. Child found in suspicious circumstances. Ethan stood. This is an active investigation, Mayor. I'll brief the council when appropriate. Of course, of course. Holloway smiled tightly. But given the circumstances, I've already called state services. They'll be here tomorrow to collect the child. Standard procedure. With all due respect, Sarah interjected, this child is traumatized. Moving her to a strange facility right now would be detrimental to her recovery. The law is clear, Pike said, his thin face pinched. No identified guardian, no local placement options. Ethan recognized a political maneuver. Holloway wanted this wrapped up quickly. The child removed before she could talk, before anyone asked too many questions about a chained girl in their pristine little town. Actually, Dr. Thompson said, her chin lifting slightly, there's a local option. Sheriff Miller is an approved emergency foster placement. His home has already been vetted for his daughter's special needs. Mayor Holloway's smile froze. Surely our sheriff is too busy to take on another child, especially one requiring such specialized attention. I'll manage, Ethan said flatly. The ensuing silence stretched until Pike broke it. Well, temporarily, then, until proper arrangements can be made. After they left, Sarah let out a breath. Sorry to volunteer you, but something about their reaction. I noticed, Ethan said. Holloway seemed awfully keen to ship her out of town. The thing is, Sarah lowered her voice, I think she's responding to your daughter. When the nurse mentioned you had a little girl, she seemed less afraid. It might help her recovery to be around another child. Unless it traumatizes Maddie, Ethan rubbed his neck. The last 3 years had been about creating stability for his daughter. Bringing home a traumatized stranger was a risk. Just for a few days, Sarah pressed, until we know more. 3 hours later, Ethan carried the sleeping girl into his home, her slight weight barely registering against his chest. The hospital had provided clean clothes, sweatpants, and a t-shirt that hung loosely on her thin frame. Her blonde hair, washed and combed, framed a face that looked younger in sleep. He placed her in the guest bedroom, formerly his office, now hastily converted with fresh sheets and an extra nightlight. Scout patted him behind him, sniffing carefully at the edge of the bed before settling on a rug beside it, clearly appointing himself guardian. You're staying with her? Ethan whispered. Scout's intelligent eyes met his, unwavering. All right then, watch over her. The next morning, Ethan found Maddie sitting cross-legged outside the guest room door, coloring book open before her. Beside her, a tray held toast, scrambled eggs, and orange juice. Breakfast she must have prepared herself. Morning, Firefly, he said softly. You make that for our guest? Maddie nodded and pushed a folded piece of paper toward him. Inside, in her careful handwriting, was a single word, Abby. Abby, is that her name? Ethan asked, surprised. Maddie shook her head, then pointed to her drawing. A girl with blonde hair. You want to call her Abby? A solemn nod. The door opened then, revealing the girl clutching the doorframe. Scout at her heels. Her eyes darted between them, wary as a cornered animal. "Good morning," Ethan said gently. "I'm Ethan. This is my daughter, Maddie." Maddie held up her drawing, then pointed to the girl, then to the name she'd written. The girl's eyes widened slightly. She reached tentatively for the paper, studied it, then looked at Maddie with the first hint of something beyond fear in her expression. "Maddie thought you might like to be called Abby while you're staying with us," Ethan explained. "Unless you prefer to tell us your real name." The girl paused, shook her head once, clutching the drawing to her chest. "That's okay," Ethan said. "No pressure. Looks like Maddie made you breakfast." As if on cue, Maddie pushed the tray forward, then scooted back, giving Abby space. The gesture, so considered from a child who struggled with social cues, made Ethan's chest tighten with pride. Abby's hand trembled as she reached for a piece of toast. She took a small bite, then another, hunger overcoming caution. Ethan's phone vibrated. A text from Tom. Plates on vehicle reported stolen 3 states over. Driver's prints in system. Petty criminal named Ray Kruger. No apparent connection to any missing children cases. Mayor asking for hourly updates. Looking at Abby cautiously eating the breakfast his silent daughter had prepared, Ethan felt a familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Something wasn't right about the situation, and his instincts, the ones that had kept his unit alive in war zones, were screaming a warning. 3 days passed in a delicate dance of cautious acclimation. Ethan had taken emergency leave, citing Maddie's needs, though in truth, he couldn't bear the thought of leaving Abby with a stranger. The girl still hadn't spoken, but the terror in her eyes had softened to weariness. She followed Maddie like a shadow, accepting the role Ethan's daughter had assigned her without protest. On their 3rd morning together, Ethan stood at the kitchen window, watching the girls in the backyard. Snow blanketed the ground, but the sun had emerged, casting long blue shadows across the white expanse. Maddie was showing Abby how to build a snowman, her mitten-clad hands gesturing animatedly. Scout bounded around them, pushing the snowball with his nose, tail wagging. "Never thought I'd see that," Deputy Tom Winters said, accepting the coffee Ethan handed him. Maddie voluntarily playing with another kid. "I know." Ethan couldn't keep the wonder from his voice. It's like Abby's silence makes Maddie comfortable. No pressure to talk back. Tom sipped his coffee, steam fogging his glasses. "Any word from the girl? Name? Where she's from?" "Nothing. Sarah says it could be trauma-induced mutism or simply fear." Ethan turned away from the window. "What have you got?" Tom pulled a folder from his jacket. "Autopsy report on our John Doe, Ray Kruger. Cause of death was a crash, but he was flying high on methamphetamines. Career criminal, mostly drug offenses in Nebraska and Wyoming. Connection to child trafficking? Nothing concrete. But here's where it gets interesting." Tom flipped a page. $10,000 in cash in the spare tire well. "And this." He produced an evidence bag containing a crumpled receipt. "Found it in his boot. It's for a wire transfer to an account in the Caymans, dated last week. $50,000. Ethan studied the paper. "Payment for delivery?" "That's my guess. But the weird part, the account holder, Pristine Futures LLC, rings a bell." Ethan frowned. "Should it? Looked familiar." So I did some digging. Pristine Futures is listed as a major donor to Mayor Holloway's last campaign. They're registered as an adoption facilitation service. A chill that had nothing to do with the winter air crept up Ethan's spine. "You thinking what I'm thinking? This might be connected to whatever was happening to that little girl." "Yeah, crossed my mind." Tom's voice lowered. "There's more. Got a call from James County Sheriff's Office. Apparently, they picked up a woman 2 days ago, strung out hysterical, claiming her boyfriend was supposed to meet her with a package but never showed. Said they were getting paid to transport a kid to a distribution center in Idaho." Ethan ran a hand over his face. "Jesus. Did she give a description?" "Blonde girl, around 12. Tom met his gaze. "Sound familiar?" Outside, Abby had stopped building the snowman. She stood stock still, staring at the tree beyond the yard, her body tense as a wire. Scout noticed, moving to her side, ears alert. "Something's wrong," Ethan said, setting down his mug. Before he could move, a sleek black SUV pulled into his driveway. The door opened, revealing a tall man in an expensive overcoat, a woman in a fur-trimmed jacket beside him. "Expecting company?" Tom asked. "No." Ethan stepped onto the porch as the couple approached. "Can I help you?" The man extended a hand. "William Preston. This is my wife, Eleanor. We understand you found our daughter." Ethan didn't take the offer hand. "Your daughter?" "Abigail," the woman said, her voice breaking. "Abigail Preston. We've been looking everywhere for her." Outside, Abby had backed against the shed, Scout positioning himself between her and the visitors. Maddie stood frozen, her eyes darting between Abby and the strangers. "Come inside," Ethan said. "We should talk." In the kitchen, Eleanor Preston produced photographs. A smiling blonde girl standing between the couple in front of a large colonial home. Another the girl on horseback, a school portrait. "She ran away 3 weeks ago," William explained. "We've been frantic. When we heard about the girl found near River Creek." "Mind if I ask why she ran?" Tom interrupted. William's jaw tightened. "Abigail has some emotional problems. She was adopted at 6, had a difficult early childhood. We've had her in therapy, but sometimes she gets these ideas, becomes defiant." "What kind of ideas?" Ethan pressed. Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "She accused us of terrible things, said we weren't her real parents, that we'd stolen her. It was heartbreaking." Ethan studied the photos. The resemblance was there, certainly, but something felt off. The girl in the picture smiled, but her eyes held a flatness, an emptiness he recognized from soldiers who'd been in battle too long. "The man she was found with," William continued. "We believe he may have groomed her online, convinced her to run away. When we heard what happened, Mr. Preston," Ethan said carefully, "the girl we found was chained inside that vehicle, physically restrained." The Prestons exchanged a look. "Maybe this man kidnapped her after she ran away," Eleanor suggested. "Took advantage of a vulnerable child." And the old injuries, the cigarette burns, the signs of prolonged malnutrition? William Preston's face hardened. "Are you accusing us of something, Sheriff? Because I assure you, we are very prominent in our community. I'm on the board of First National Bank. Eleanor chairs 3 charitable foundations. I'm just trying to understand the situation," Ethan said evenly. "The girl hasn't spoken since we found her. She's clearly terrified." "Of course she is," Eleanor said. "She's been through a traumatic experience. That's why we need to get her home, back to her doctors, her support system." "I'll need to verify your identity and your relationship to the child," Tom interjected. "Standard procedure." "Absolutely." William reached into his coat, producing a leather folder. "We brought everything. Abigail's birth certificate, adoption papers, medical records. We've already spoken with Mayor Holloway, who assured us of the town's full cooperation." Of course they had. "If you don't mind," Ethan said, "I'd like Dr. Thompson to examine these records, and we'll need to see how the girl reacts to you." "Her name is Abigail," Eleanor said, voice sharpening. "And she is our daughter. Please, let's ask her, shall we?" The group moved to the window. Outside, Maddie had inched closer to Abby, who remained pressed against the shed, Scout vigilant beside them. "Abigail," Eleanor called through the glass, waving. "Sweetheart, it's Mom and Dad. We've been so worried." The transformation was immediate and horrifying. Abby's face drained of color. Her knees buckled, and she sank into the snow, arms wrapping around herself, rocking back and forth. A high, keening sound escaped her, the first noise Ethan had heard her make. Maddie dropped to her knees beside Abby, her own eyes wide with alarm. Scout barked sharply, placing himself more firmly between the girls and the house. "She's upset," Ethan said, stepping away from the window. "I think it's best if you leave for now." "That's our daughter." William's voice rose. "We're not leaving without her." "Sir, your daughter is clearly distressed by your presence." Tom said. As law enforcement, we have a duty to ensure her well-being while we investigate. Investigate what? William demanded. We provided documentation. We've identified our missing child. Mayor Holloway has already initiated the transfer of custody. Mayor Holloway doesn't have that authority, Ethan said coldly. And until I'm satisfied that returning this child to you is in her best interest, she stays here. You'll be hearing from our attorney, William snapped, taking his wife's arm. They left. Ethan and Tom went outside. Abby was still rocking, tears streaming silently down her face. Maddie sat beside her, one small hand tentatively patting Abby's shoulder. Ethan said softly, crouching in the snow before them, "They're gone now. You're safe." Abby's eyes, wild with terror, locked onto his. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally, a hoarse whisper emerged. "Not safe." It was the first time she'd spoken. Ethan kept his voice gentle, though his heart hammered. "Abby, do you know those people?" A jerky nod. "Are they your parents?" Her entire body shuddered. "No," she whispered. "Not my parents." "Did they hurt you?" Another nod, so slight he almost missed it. "Okay," Ethan said. "I won't let them take you. I promise." She stared at him, searching for truth in his face. Others. That night, after both girls were finally asleep, Ethan called Sarah Thompson. "Preston's documentation looks legitimate," she said after he explained the situation. "But something isn't right. The medical records list vaccinations and routine visits. But there's nothing about treating the injuries I observed. Not a single record of malnutrition or cigarette burns. Could they have been treated elsewhere, records not transferred? Possible, but unlikely. These are comprehensive files from their family physician. So, they're either forged or the doctor was complicit," Ethan concluded. "There's something else," Sarah said hesitantly. "When I examined Abby, I noticed a small mark behind her ear. At first, I thought it was a birthmark, but looking closer, it appears to be a tattoo. Faded, old, small enough to be hidden by her hair. It's a number, 326. A number? Ethan frowned, like an identification. "That would be my guess." "Ethan, what if she was never formally adopted? What if she was purchased?" The word hung in the air between them, ugly but impossible to ignore. "The Prestons mentioned Mayor Holloway," Ethan said slowly. "And Tom found a connection between the money in that car and a company that donated to Holloway's campaign." "You think our mayor's involved in child trafficking?" Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think it's worth investigating. But quietly, if the Prestons are connected enough to have the mayor in their pocket, we need to be careful." The next morning, Ethan found Maddie sitting at the kitchen table before dawn, a sheet of paper before her. She pushed it toward him as he entered. It was a drawing. Abby in a large room with marble floors, surrounded by other children. Adults in suits stood around the perimeter. One child was being led away by a couple that looked suspiciously like the Prestons. "Did Abby tell you about this?" Ethan asked gently. Maddie nodded, pointing to her ear, then to the back of her neck. "Numbers?" The children had numbers. Another nod. Ethan crouched beside his daughter. "Firefly, this is very important. Is Abby afraid of going back to this place?" Maddie's eyes filled with tears. She nodded vigorously, then drew a quick sketch of a house with a fence around it, adding stick figures outside. She pointed to one, then to herself, then to Ethan. "You want her to stay with us?" Maddie grabbed his hand, squeezing it with surprising strength, her eyes pleading. "I'll do my best," he promised. "Now, can you stay with Abby for a bit? I need to make some calls." His first call was to the FBI field office in Helena. Agent Diana Carter listened to his concerns, promised to look into Preston's and pristine futures, but warned it would take time to build a case. "In the meantime," she said, "your priority is the child's safety. If these people are part of a trafficking network, they won't give up easily." His second call was to Judge Martha Blackburn, an old-school jurist known for her fierce protection of children's rights. She agreed to issue an emergency temporary guardianship order, keeping Abby in Ethan's care until a proper investigation could be completed. But Ethan, she warned, if these people have influence, they'll fight this. Be prepared. He was hanging up when Scout began barking urgently from upstairs. Ethan took the stairs two at a time, finding Abby huddled in the corner of the bathroom, trembling violently. Hey, it's okay, he soothed, keeping his distance. What happened? Bad dream, she whispered, her eyes darting to the window. They're coming. They always come. No one's taking you anywhere, Ethan assured her. I've spoken to a judge. You can stay here for now. She looked at him, hope warring with disbelief on her small face. You don't understand, she said, her voice stronger than before. They're powerful. They buy people. They bought me. The blunt statement hit Ethan like a physical blow. Bought you? Abby wrapped her arms around her knees. From the house. The marble house. Kids go in. Kids come out with new parents, but not real parents. She swallowed hard. They pay a lot of money. More if you're pretty. More if you're American. The Prestons bought you, Ethan said, the pieces falling into place. From this marble house. She nodded. 3 years ago. I was 9. There were papers, but they weren't real. They said, my name was Abigail. Said I had to forget my real name. Do you remember your real name? Ethan asked gently. A tear slid down her cheek. Hannah Miller. The coincidence of the last name wasn't lost on Ethan, but he focused on keeping his voice calm. And your real parents? Do you remember them? Mom worked at a diner. Dad fixed cars. Her voice dropped. They said Mom and Dad were dead in an accident, but I don't know if that's true. And the Prestons. They hurt you, Abby, Hannah. She looked down. Not always. At first they were nice, but I wouldn't call them Mom and Dad. Wouldn't forget. That made them mad. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a lattice of thin scars. Mr. Preston said he paid good money for me, said I should be grateful. The other children in your drawing, Ethan continued. There were others at the marble house. Hannah nodded. Lots. Some babies, some older. They had numbers, too. She touched the spot behind her ear. Mine's 326. The marble house. Do you know where it is? A big city. It was cold. We drove a long time to get to the Preston's house. Chicago, maybe, Ethan murmured. Or Minneapolis. They'll find me, Hannah whispered. They always find the ones who run. Not this time, Ethan said firmly. This time, we're going to find them first. Later that day, a plain envelope was slipped under Ethan's front door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. Return what isn't yours. Beneath the words was a photograph of Jessica's grave, the headstone desecrated with red paint. Ethan's blood ran cold. He locked the doors, checked the windows, and called Tom. I'm sending a patrol to watch your place, his deputy said after Ethan described the threat. And Ethan, I did some digging into your wife's accident. The brake lines were cut. The world seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe Jessica's death wasn't an accident, and maybe it's connected to what's happening now. That night, Ethan sat at his desk, old case files spread before him. Jessica's accident report, newspaper clippings, insurance documents. 3 years ago, his wife had been driving home from her job at the county records office when her car went off Lookout Road, slamming into a tree. She died instantly. The investigation ruled it a tragic accident, brake failure on a rainy night. But Jessica had called him that afternoon, excited about something she discovered at work. It doesn't make sense, she'd said. These adoption records. The dates don't match, and the money trails. Ethan, I think something illegal is happening. She'd promised to explain when she got home, but she never arrived. Ethan had been too consumed by grief, too focused on Maddie's sudden silence to pursue Jessica's concerns. Now he wondered if his wife had stumbled onto the same trafficking network that had ensnared Hannah. A soft sound made him look up. Hannah stood in the doorway, Scout beside her. Can't sleep, she murmured. Me neither, Ethan admitted. Hot chocolate in the kitchen? As Hannah cupped her mug with both hands, she spoke without prompting. You're going to send me away, aren't you? When it gets too dangerous. No, Ethan said firmly. I made you a promise. But they threaten your family. She nodded toward the note on the counter. Because of me. Hannah, look at me. Ethan waited until her eyes met his. What's happening isn't your fault. None of it. Not what the Prestons did. Not this threat. You're a child who needs help, and that's what you're going to get. Why? She asked, the simple question heavy with confusion. Why would you risk your family for me? Ethan thought of Jessica, of her passionate belief in justice, of how she'd have moved heaven and earth to help this child. Because it's the right thing to do, he said simply. And because Maddie needs you, too. Hannah's brow furrowed. She doesn't talk. No, she doesn't. Not since her mom died. But she draws what she can't say. And she made me understand that you belong here with us. For as long as you need. Hannah stared into her mug. I used to talk all the time before. My real mom said I never stopped asking questions. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Drove her crazy sometimes. I bet Maddie was the same, Ethan said, always curious, always chattering. As if summoned by her name, Maddie padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes sleepily. She climbed onto the chair beside Hannah, leaning her head against the older girl's shoulder. Want some hot chocolate, Firefly? Ethan asked. Maddie nodded, then reached for Hannah's hand, giving it a quick squeeze. The simple gesture of comfort from a child who struggled with physical touch nearly undid Ethan. As he set a mug before his daughter, Ethan made a silent vow. He would protect these girls, both of them, with everything he had. And he would find the people who had hurt Hannah, who might have killed Jessica. No matter what it took, no matter who was involved, he would bring the entire network down. Because somewhere out there, other children waited in marble halls, bearing numbers instead of names, waiting for someone to remember that they were not commodities to be bought and sold, but children worthy of love and safety. And Ethan Miller had always been a man who kept his promises. Snow fell in fat, heavy flakes, accumulating quickly on the roads as Ethan drove toward town, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The municipal building loomed ahead, its stone facade gray against the white landscape. Mayor Holloway would be in his office this morning. He always started Thursdays with constituent meetings. You sure about this? Tom asked from the passenger seat. Going direct might spook him. I'm done tiptoeing, Ethan replied. Hannah's been with us a week. The Prestons' lawyers filed 3 motions, and I've received 2 more threatening notes. Someone slashed Scout's dog bed while we were at Sarah's office yesterday. They're escalating. After dropping the girls at Dr. Thompson's clinic, the only place Ethan trusted outside his own home, he and Tom had driven straight to confront the mayor. In his pocket, Ethan carried copies of the documents Agent Carter had faxed that morning. Financial records showing irregular payments from Pristine Futures to an offshore account linked to Richard Holloway, dating back 5 years. Just remember, Tom cautioned, we need him talking, not lawyering up. The receptionist tried to stop them, but Ethan pushed past her into the mayor's office. Holloway looked up from his desk, irritation flashing across his features before settling into his practiced politician smile. Sheriff, this is unexpected. We need to talk about Pristine Futures, Ethan said without preamble, and why they've been depositing $10,000 into your Cayman account every quarter since 2019. The color drained from Holloway's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan tossed the financial records onto the desk. Yes, you do. Just like you know why the Prestons are so desperate to get Hannah, not Abigail, back. Just like you knew about Jessica's research into falsified adoption records before her accident. The mayor's eyes narrowed. Are you accusing me of something, Sheriff? I'm giving you a chance to come clean, Ethan replied. A child was found chained in a burning car. She has cigarette burns on her body and a tattoo identifying her as property. She says she was sold to the Prestons through some kind of auction house. And the money trail leads back to you. You have no idea what you're getting into, Holloway said, voice dropping. This is bigger than River Creek. Bigger than you. Enlighten me. The mayor leaned back, a calculating look crossing his face. Not here. Meet me at Wilson's Point tonight. 8 o'clock. I'll tell you everything. Names, dates, locations. His eyes flicked to Tom. Come alone. Outside, Tom grabbed Ethan's arm. You're not seriously considering meeting him. Of course not, Ethan said. It's either a trap or he's planning to run. Put a deputy on his house. I want to know if he tries to leave town. Back at the clinic, Sarah pulled Ethan aside, her expression grave. Hannah had a panic attack while you were gone. She saw a black SUV drive by twice. The Prestons. I didn't see the driver, but Ethan, Sarah hesitated. During the attack, she said something about Uncle Richard taking her back to the Marble House. Would she mean Mayor Holloway? Cold fury washed through Ethan. Where are the girls now? In my office, drawing with Scout. They're okay, just shaken. Ethan found Hannah curled in an armchair, Maddie at her feet. A sketch pad lay open on the table, filled with Hannah's careful rendering of an imposing building with columns and large windows. At the top, she'd written the placement center. Hannah, Ethan said gently, can you tell me about Uncle Richard? The girl flinched. He visited the Prestons sometimes. Said I was a good investment. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He's the one who brings the new children. Takes the ones who don't work out back to the Marble House. Did he ever mention the name of the place? The Marble House. Hannah shook her head, then paused. But there was a sign outside. The 3 Ps, Mr. Preston called it. Perfect place. Something. Perfect placement. Perfect placement program. Ethan suggested, thinking of pristine futures. Hannah's eyes widened. Yes, that's it. Ethan exchanged a look with Sarah. Good job remembering that, he told Hannah. That helps a lot. Are we going home now? Maddie asked, the first word she'd spoken in 3 years. The room fell silent. Hannah's mouth dropped open. Sarah gasped softly. Ethan felt as though the air had been punched from his lungs. Firefly, he managed, crouching before his daughter. You're talking. Maddie nodded solemnly. For Hannah, she said, the word slightly rusty from disuse. She needs us to use words. Drawing isn't enough anymore. Tears blurred Ethan's vision as he gathered Maddie into his arms. She stiffened briefly, then relaxed against him, small arms encircling his neck. Yes, he said, voice thick with emotion. We're going home now. But home wasn't safe anymore. As they pulled into the driveway, Ethan immediately noticed the front door standing ajar. Scout growled from the back seat. Stay in the car, he instructed, drawing his weapon. Lock the doors. Tom emerged from the house as Ethan approached, face grim. They tossed the place. Your files are gone. Everything on Jessica's accident. The photos of Hannah's injuries, all of it. Inside, the destruction was methodical rather than random. Drawers emptied, filing cabinets ransacked. Ethan's computer missing. But most disturbing was the message painted across the living room wall in dark red paint. Time's up. We can't stay here, Ethan said. They're closing in. 2 hours later, they arrived at Tom's hunting cabin, a secluded structure 15 miles from town, accessible only by a dirt road now nearly impassable with snow. With no electricity or phone lines, it was off the grid, exactly what they needed. As Tom started a fire in the wood stove, Ethan received a call from Agent Carter. We've got movement, she said without preamble. Mayor Holloway booked a private flight from Helena to Chicago, departing tonight, and the Prestons checked out of their hotel an hour ago. They're running, Ethan said, or regrouping. I've got agents monitoring the airports and state lines. But Miller, I need more than a terrified child's testimony and some suspicious wire transfers to move on this. These people have resources, connections. One wrong move and they'll disappear. Or worse, they'll have enough political leverage to shut down the investigation. What about the Marble House? Hannah remembered the name. Perfect placement program. Anything on that? Checking now. Keyboard clicks came through the line. Perfect placement program. Registered as a subsidiary of Pristine Futures. Operating out a converted mansion in Lake Forest outside Chicago. Officially a transitional housing facility for children awaiting adoption. That's it, Ethan said. That's the auction house. I'll get a surveillance team in place, but Miller, do not engage. We need to build this case properly. After hanging up, Ethan sat heavily on the cabin's worn sofa. Hannah and Maddie had claimed the small bedroom, Scout standing guard outside their door. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. "You know the Prestons will come for her," Tom said, stoking the fire. "They've invested too much to just walk away." "Let them come," Ethan replied grimly. "I'm counting on it." That night, as snow continued falling, transforming the forest into a white fortress, the girls sat at the rough-hewn table, playing cards by lantern light. Maddie spoke occasionally. Simple phrases, questions, her voice growing stronger with each utterance. Hannah responded with increasing animation, her laughter startling in its brightness. "Sheriff," she called, laying down a card. "Can we do the stars tonight?" Ethan smiled. He'd taught the girls his and Maddie's nightly ritual, naming something good that had happened, then adding a star to their collection. They brought the paper constellation from home, taping it to the cabin wall. Of course. He sat with them, producing the gold star stickers from his pocket. "Who wants to go first?" "Me," Maddie said, taking a sticker. She placed it carefully on the paper. "My star is for talking again. It feels good." "That's a perfect star," Ethan said, swallowing past a lump in his throat. Hannah took her sticker. "My star is for," she paused, considering, "for finding people who believe me." As she placed her star beside Maddie's, Scout suddenly lifted his head, ears perked. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Ethan motioned for silence, extinguishing the lantern. Outside, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of an approaching vehicle. "Back room," he whispered. "Now." The girls scurried into the bedroom. Ethan drew his weapon as Tom doused the fire, plunging the cabin into darkness. Through the window, headlights cut through the falling snow, illuminating the clearing before the cabin. Not one vehicle, but three, a black SUV flanked by two sedans. "How did they find us?" Tom muttered. Ethan's mind raced. The clinic had been the last place they'd been seen. Had someone followed them? A terrible thought struck him. He pulled out his phone, checking for tracking apps. Nothing obvious, but the battery was draining faster than normal. "My phone," he said. "They must have hacked it while we were at the house." He switched it off, but it was too late. Car doors slammed outside. Flashlight beams swept across the cabin's exterior. "Miller," a voice called. "William Preston. We know you're in there. Bring out our daughter, and no one needs to get hurt." Ethan moved to the back room, finding Hannah white-faced but composed, Maddie clutching Scout's collar. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "There's a cellar under the floorboards in the closet. Tom's gonna hide you there while I distract them." "No," Hannah said fiercely. "They'll kill you. That's what they do to people who interfere." "I'll be fine," Ethan assured her, though he knew the odds. "Maddie, take care of Scout. Keep him quiet." As Tom helped the girls into the hidden cellar, Ethan positioned himself by the front window. Through the glass, he counted 6 men. The Prestons, Mayor Holloway, and 3 others wearing heavy coats that couldn't quite conceal shoulder holsters. "Last chance, Miller," Preston called. "Send out the girl, or we're coming in." Ethan raised his voice. "The FBI knows everything. They're watching the perfect placement program right now." "It's over, Preston." A stunned silence followed his words. Then Holloway stepped forward. "He's bluffing," the mayor said. "The feds don't have anything solid. If they did, they'd be here." "I sent them everything," Ethan countered. "Jessica's research, Hannah's testimony, financial records. They're moving on the Chicago location as we speak." One of the armed men approached Preston, speaking urgently. Preston's face contorted with rage. He grabbed a shotgun from the SUV, leveling it at the cabin. "You've ruined everything," he roared, firing. Glass shattered as the round tore through the window. Ethan dropped to the floor as a second blast splintered the door. "They're coming in," Tom warned, rejoining him. "We're outgunned." "Back door," Ethan directed. "Draw them away from the cabin. I'll circle around." They slipped out the rear entrance as boot steps thumped onto the front porch. The storm provided cover, the heavy snow muffling their movements as they separated. Tom headed for the tree lean, deliberately making noise. The strategy worked. 3 of the men pursued him, leaving Preston, Holloway, and one guard to enter the cabin. Ethan circled back, approaching from the blind side. Through the window, he saw Preston tearing the place apart, throwing furniture, ripping up floorboards in the main room. "She's not here," the mayor said. "They must have moved her already." "Check the bedroom again," Preston snapped. "She's here somewhere. I can feel it." The guard moved toward the back room, gun drawn. Ethan had seconds to act. He kicked in the front door, weapon raised. "Freeze! Drop your weapons." Preston whirled, firing wildly, wood splintered beside Ethan's head. He dove for cover behind the overturned table, returning fire. The guard emerged from the bedroom, catching Ethan in a crossfire. Pain exploded in Ethan's shoulder as a bullet found its mark. He gasped, grip faltering on his weapon. Through blurring vision, he saw Mayor Holloway backing toward the door. "Finish him!" Preston ordered the guard. "Then find the girl." The guard approached, weapon aimed at Ethan's head. Time seemed to slow. Ethan thought of Maddie, of her voice finally returned, of Hannah and her desperate courage. He thought of Jessica, who might have died for uncovering this very network. He couldn't fail them now. With his remaining strength, Ethan lunged, tackling the guard's legs. They crashed to the floor, wrestling for the gun. Preston's footsteps pounded across the room, the shotgun swinging toward them. A ferocious bark tore through the air as Scout burst from the bedroom, launching himself at Preston. The man screamed as powerful jaws clamped onto his arm, the shotgun discharging harmlessly into the ceiling. In the confusion, Ethan wrested the guard's gun away, striking him unconscious with the butt of the weapon. He turned to find Preston on the ground, Scout standing over him, hackles raised, teeth bared. "Call off your dog," Preston gasped. "He's not my dog," Ethan said coldly. "He makes his own decisions." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Holloway had vanished into the storm, but there would be time to find him later. A small voice called from the bedroom, "Scout here." The German shepherd gave Preston one final warning growl before trotting back to Maddie, who stood in the doorway. Behind her, Hannah emerged from the closet, eyes wide with fear and hope. "Is it over?" she asked. Ethan pressed a hand to his bleeding shoulder. "Almost," he promised. "Almost over." As state police vehicles surrounded the cabin, Ethan sat on the porch steps, a blanket draped over his shoulders, watching paramedics load Preston into an ambulance. Tom had returned with reinforcements after outrunning his pursuers, and FBI agents were already combing the scene. Agent Carter approached, snow dusting her dark hair. "We got Holloway trying to steal a snowmobile 3 miles south," she said. "And based on what we found on Preston's phone, we've got enough for warrants on Chicago location." She crouched to meet his eyes. "You took one hell of a risk, Miller." "Had to," Ethan said simply. "For the girls." Inside the cabin, visible through the broken window, Maddie and Hannah sat together on the sofa, Scout stretched protectively across their feet. As Ethan watched, Hannah picked up a gold star sticker from the floor, one that had survived the destruction. She placed it gently on the wall beside them, saying something that made Maddie smile. "Your daughter's talking again," Agent Carter observed. "Yes," Ethan said, fresh gratitude washing through him, despite his injury. "Yes, she is." The snow was falling more gently now, the storm beginning to pass. Dawn would break soon, bringing a new day and the beginning of justice. There would be trials, testimonies, healing, and hardship yet to come. But in this moment, watching the girls who had taught each other to be brave, Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced since Jessica died. Hope, fragile but undeniable, like the first green shoot breaking through winter soil. The fight wasn't over, but they had survived the night, and sometimes that was victory enough. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors and the occasional squeak of rubber-soled shoes in the hallway. Ethan lay propped against pillows, his left shoulder heavily bandaged, and 4 dripping antibiotics into his arm. The bullet had torn through muscle but missed major arteries. A lucky break, the surgeon had called it. Ethan didn't feel particularly lucky. 3 days had passed since the shootout at the cabin. William Preston was in custody, facing charges ranging from attempted murder to human trafficking. Richard Holloway had been arrested trying to board a private plane in Helena. The third gunman had turned state's evidence, detailing a network that spanned multiple states and reached into the highest levels of several communities. But Eleanor Preston had vanished, along with two of her associates. Ethan stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them again. 48 in total. He'd been doing this for hours, trying to quiet his racing thoughts. Hannah and Maddie were safe, staying with Sarah Thompson under police protection. Tom checked in regularly, keeping him updated on the investigation. Agent Carter had called that morning to report they'd executed a search warrant on the Chicago mansion. They'd found records, photographs, even a ledger detailing inventory and sales, but no children. The house had been emptied recently and hurriedly, based on the evidence left behind. A soft knock interrupted his counting. Tom entered, carrying a cardboard cup of coffee that smelled infinitely better than the hospital brew. "You look terrible," his deputy said by way of greeting. "Thanks." Ethan attempted to sit up straighter, wincing as pain lanced through his shoulder. "Any word on Eleanor Preston?" Tom's expression darkened. "Nothing solid. She's got resources we're only beginning to understand. Carter thinks she might have fled the country. And the other children, the ones from the Marble House? They're working on it. The records they seized indicate at least 30 minors were processed through that facility in the past year alone. FBI is cross-referencing with missing persons reports. But many of these kids..." Tom hesitated. "Many were never reported missing. They came from situations where no one was looking for them." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, the weight of it settling in his chest alongside the physical pain. "What about Hannah? Any progress finding her real family?" "That's actually why I'm here." Tom pulled a folder from inside his jacket. They found a match. Hannah Miller, reported missing from Billings 5 years ago. Parents are David and Susan Miller. No relation to you, by the way, just a coincidence. Are they still looking for her? That's the thing. Tom's voice softened. David Miller died 3 years ago, heart attack. Susan Miller was killed in a car accident last year. The news hit Ethan like a physical blow. After everything Hannah had endured, to learn that her real parents were gone. No other family? Next of kin's a grandmother in assisted living, but she's not in any condition to take custody. So what happens to her now? Foster system, most likely. Unless, Tom gave him a meaningful look. Unless what? Unless someone applies to be her guardian. Someone who's already been vetted as a foster parent. Someone she trusts. Ethan stared at his friend. "You think I should take her permanently?" "I think she and Maddie are good for each other. And I think you're already halfway there." Tom set the coffee on the bedside table. Just something to consider. After Tom left, Ethan lay back, mind churning. Could he really do it? Raise 2 traumatized girls on his own? He'd barely managed with Maddie after Jessica died, had questioned his abilities as a father countless times. And Hannah would need specialized care, therapy, stability that he wasn't sure he could provide. Yet the alternative, Hannah disappearing into the foster system, Maddie losing this newfound connection that had somehow unlocked her voice, seemed unthinkable. A commotion in the hallway drew his attention. Raised voices, the clatter of something falling. Ethan tensed, reaching instinctively for the call button, but the door burst open. Scout bounded in, tongue lolling, tail wagging furiously. Behind him came Maddie and Hannah, followed by an exasperated-looking nurse. "Sir, I tried to explain visiting hours." "It's fine," Ethan assured her, unable to keep the smile from his face as Scout planted his front paws on the edge of the bed, whining joyfully. "Their family." The nurse hesitated, then nodded, withdrawing. Maddie climbed carefully onto the foot of the bed, while Hannah hung back, eyes fixed on his bandaged shoulder. "You're hurt because of me," she said quietly. "No," Ethan replied firmly. "I'm hurt because some very bad people did very bad things. None of this is your fault." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "My real parents are dead, aren't they? That's why Mr. Winters looked so sad when he talked to you." Ethan's heart sank. Of course, she'd read Tom's expression. She'd become expert at interpreting adults' emotions as a survival mechanism. "Yes," he said gently. I'm so sorry, Hannah. She nodded, a tear spilling down her cheek. I thought maybe I hadn't let myself hope. Not really, but still. I know. And he did know that terrible moment when hope finally surrendered to grief. He'd lived it himself. Where will I go now? Hannah asked, the question barely audible. Before Ethan could respond, Maddie spoke up, "You'll stay with us." She said it with such certainty, such finality, that Ethan almost laughed despite the gravity of the moment. "Firefly, it's not that simple," he began. "Why not?" Maddie challenged, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Hannah needs a home. We have room. She helps me talk. Scout loves her." She ticked off each point on her small fingers. "And you promised she could stay." "I promised she'd be safe," Ethan corrected gently. "Same thing," Maddie insisted. "Safe as with us." Hannah watched this exchange with wide eyes, hope and fear battling across her features. "Could I?" she whispered. "Could I really stay with you?" Ethan looked at these two children who had already endured so much. His silent daughter, now advocating fiercely, and this broken girl who had somehow found the courage to trust again. How could he possibly separate them now? "We'd need to talk to a lot of people," he said carefully. "Social workers, judges. It wouldn't happen right away." "But you'd try," Hannah pressed. "You'd really try to keep me?" "Yes," Ethan said, the decision crystallizing in that moment. "Yes, I'll try." The smile that broke across Hannah's face was like sunrise after the longest night. Later, after the girls had been ushered out by Sarah, who had been waiting in the hallway, Ethan drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. In his dreams, he saw Jessica, her face worried as she flipped through files in the county records office. "The dates don't match," she kept saying. "The money trails." He awoke with a start as the door clicked open. The room was dim, evening shadows stretching across the floor. A figure stood beside his bed, a woman in scrubs, her back to him as she adjusted his four. "What time is it?" Ethan asked groggily. The woman turned. "Time for loose end to be tied up," Eleanor Preston said, her elegant face eerily calm as she held up a syringe. Ethan lunged to the call button, but she was faster, yanking out of reach. Pain exploded through his injured shoulder, nearly causing him to black out. "This will look like a complication," she continued conversationally. "A blood clot, perhaps? Tragic, but not uncommon after gunshot wounds." She leaned closer. "You should have left well enough alone, Sheriff. You have no idea what you've interfered with, what power we wield. The FBI knows everything." Ethan managed through clenched teeth. "Killing me won't stop the investigation." "Perhaps not entirely," she conceded, "but it will send a message and it will satisfy me personally." Her smile tightened. "You took something that belonged to me, property I paid handsomely for." "Hannah is a child, not property," Ethan growled, desperately searching for a weapon, anything to defend himself. "Oh, she was never just a child," Eleanor said. "She was an investment, a carefully selected bloodline with specific genetic markers. Our clients pay millions for children with the potential." Horror washed through Ethan as the implication became clear. This wasn't just trafficking. It was something even more sinister, something like selective breeding. "You're insane," he whispered. "No," Eleanor replied calmly. "I'm a businesswoman and you're a liability." She reached for his foreport, syringe poised, when a low growl came from the doorway. Scout stood there, hackles raised, teeth bared. Eleanor frowned. "Call off your dog, Sheriff." "He's not my dog," Ethan said, echoing his words from the cabin. "He makes his own decisions." Scout advanced slowly, his growl deepening. Behind him, Sarah Thompson appeared, her face registering first confusion, then shock as she recognized Eleanor. "Security." Sarah shouted, backing into the hallway. "Room 412, now." Eleanor's composure shattered. She lunged toward Ethan with a syringe, but Scout was faster. The German shepherd launched himself across the room, powerful jaws closing around her arm. The syringe clattered to the floor as Eleanor screamed, falling backward. Security officers rushed in, followed by Tom Winters, who'd been returning for an evening check-in. In seconds, Eleanor was restrained, her disguise removed, Scout standing guard until she was handcuffed. As they led her away, she looked back at Ethan, hatred burning in her eyes. "This isn't over," she hissed. "There are more of us than you can imagine." Perhaps, Ethan thought, watching her disappear down the corridor. But now they knew, and they would be ready. The courthouse stood at the center of town, a solid brick building with white columns and broad steps leading to heavy oak doors. 6 weeks had passed since Eleanor Preston's arrest in Ethan's hospital room. Winter had begun to release its grip on River Creek. Patches of grass emerging from melting snow, crocuses pushing through the softening earth beside walkways. Ethan sat on a bench in the corridor, his arm still in a sling, though the pain had diminished to a dull ache. The preliminary hearing for the custody petition will begin in 20 minutes. Hannah sat beside him, wearing a navy blue dress Sarah had helped her select, her blonde hair neatly braided. She hadn't stopped fidgeting with the hem of her skirt since they'd arrived. "What if they say no?" she whispered, voicing the fear that had kept her awake the previous night. "Then we appeal," Ethan answered simply. "We don't give up." On his other side, Maddie leaned against his good arm, thumbing through a picture book. She'd been speaking more each day, though she still preferred drawing the conversation with most people. Scout lay at their feet, his service vest identifying him as a therapy dog, an official designation Sarah had helped arrange after his role in Eleanor's capture. Tom approached, straightening his rarely worn tie. "Judge Harmon is running late. Chambers just called. It'll be another 30 minutes. Hannah's shoulders slumped with relief at the reprieve, but Ethan noticed her gaze fixed on something down the corridor. Following her line of sight, he saw Agent Carter walking toward them, accompanied by an unfamiliar woman in a tailored suit. Sheriff Miller. Carter greeted him. "Can we speak privately?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Hannah, who had gone very still. "It's okay," Tom said. "I'll stay with the girls." In a small conference room, Agent Carter introduced her companion. "This is Special Agent Rebecca Linden from our Chicago office. She's been leading the investigation into the Perfect Placement program. We've made significant progress," Linden began without preamble. 17 children have been recovered so far, all placed through the network. The operation was more extensive than we initially believed. We've identified facilities in 3 states with connections to wealthy clients across the country. What about the other children from the Chicago house?" Ethan asked. Hannah mentioned dozens. "Most were moved before we could execute our warrant," Linden admitted. "We believe they were relocated to secondary facilities. We're working on locating them." Carter picked up the thread. "The reason we're here, William Preston has agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for considerations in sentencing. His testimony has implicated several high-profile individuals, including 2 state senators and a federal judge." "Let me guess," Ethan said. "He's also implicated my wife's death." The agents exchanged a glance. "Yes," Linden confirmed. "Preston claims Richard Holloway ordered the sabotage of your wife's car after discovering she was investigating irregularities in adoption records. The man who carried out the actual tampering was one of the gunmen at the cabin. Despite having suspected this for weeks, hearing it confirmed sent a wave of cold fury through Ethan. "Do you have proof?" "We're building the case," Carter assured him. "But there's something else you need to know before the hearing." She slid a folder across the table. "This arrived from forensics this morning." Inside was a DNA report. Ethan scanned it, brow furrowing. "I don't understand." "We ran Hannah's DNA against a national database, try and confirm her identity," Linden explained. "There was a match to the sample you provided of your late wife." Ethan looked up sharply. "What are you saying?" "Hannah Miller is Jessica Miller's niece," Carter said gently. "Her biological mother, Susan Miller, was your wife's sister." The room seemed to tilt beneath Ethan. "That's impossible. Jessica was an only child. According to the records we uncovered, Susan was given up for adoption at birth. Jessica's parents never told her she had a sister. But the coincidence, Hannah ending up here in River Creek." "Not a coincidence," Linden interjected. "Based on Preston's testimony, the Perfect Placement program specifically targeted children with desirable genetic profiles. They maintained extensive records on birth families, sometimes going back generations. When Jessica began investigating adoption irregularities, someone in the organization recognized her name, made the connection to Hannah, and flagged it. They knew, Ethan said slowly, the horrifying truth dawning. They knew Hannah was Jessica's niece when they killed her. Yes, Carter confirmed. And they specifically selected River Creek as the headquarters for their Montana operation because it was Jessica's hometown. Holloway was already their operative here. But why bring Hannah through River Creek? Why risk her being seen? They were moving their premium merchandise to a new facility in Canada, Lyndon explained. River Creek was a stopover point. When Hannah escaped, it threatened to expose their entire operation. Ethan stared at the DNA report, mind reeling. Does Hannah know about Jessica being her aunt? No, Carter replied. We wanted you to decide how and when to tell her. When Ethan returned to the bench, Hannah immediately sensed something had changed. Her eyes searched his face, worry creasing her forehead. What's wrong? She asked. Did they find something bad about me? Ethan sat beside her, choosing his words carefully. No, nothing bad, but they did find something surprising. Something that might help explain why you were brought through River Creek. Before he could continue, the courtroom doors opened. Judge Harmon had arrived early, after all. Tom caught Ethan's eye, nodding toward the entrance, where Eleanor Preston's attorney stood conferring with a stern-faced woman from Child Protective Services. We need to go in, Tom said quietly. Whatever it is, it'll have to wait. Inside the courtroom, Ethan led the girls to their designated table. Hannah's hand slipped into his, cold and trembling. Maddie took her other hand, the three forming an unbroken chain. Scouts settled at their feet, alert but calm. Judge Martha Harmon, a formidable woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair cut in a practical bob, surveyed the room. This is a closed preliminary hearing regarding petition case number 478B, the guardianship application for minor child Hannah Miller. Is petitioner present? Yes, Your Honor, Ethan's attorney responded. Sheriff Ethan Miller is present and prepared. And the representatives from Child Protective Services? The stern-faced woman rose. Present, Your Honor. Margaret Dawson, Director of Regional Placement. Judge Harmon nodded. I'll hear opening statements. Then we'll proceed with the presentation of evidence regarding suitability and best interests. As the proceedings began, Ethan found himself only half listening to the legal arguments. His mind kept returning to the revelation about Jessica and Hannah, blood relatives connected by a bond neither had known existed, had some instinct, some whisper of shared DNA, contributed to his immediate protectiveness toward Hannah, to Maddie's unusual acceptance of the older girl. The CPS representative was speaking now, her tone professionally dispassionate. We acknowledge Sheriff Miller's service to the community and his role in rescuing the minor child. We have serious concerns about placement stability. As a single father with a special needs child and an active law enforcement career, adding another traumatized child to the household seems inadvisable. Furthermore, given the ongoing criminal investigation in which both Sheriff Miller and the minor are witnesses, we recommend neutral placement to avoid any appearance of witness coaching or contamination. Hannah's grip tightened painfully on Ethan's hand. He squeezed back gently, trying to reassure her. His attorney countered with testimony from Sarah Thompson about the girls' bond, about Maddie's remarkable progress since Hannah's arrival, about the stability and safety Ethan had provided despite extraordinary circumstances. Then came the surprise. Tom took the stand, not as Ethan's friend or colleague, but as an official representative of the Sheriff's Department. In light of recent events, he testified, Sheriff Miller has been offered and has accepted the position of Regional Coordinator for the Montana Child Protection Task Force, a joint operation between state law enforcement and the FBI. This position would remove him from active patrol duty, providing regular hours and significantly reduce safety risks, while utilizing his expertise in identifying and dismantling child trafficking networks. Ethan stared at his deputy in shock. They discussed the possibility of such a role, but nothing had been finalized. Tom gave him the slightest of nods. He'd accelerated the process, knowing it would strengthen the custody petition. Judge Harmon leaned forward. And Sheriff Miller has accepted this position? The paperwork was finalized yesterday. Tom confirmed. The appointment begins next month. As the hearing continued, Agent Carter was called to testify about the investigation, carefully avoiding any mention of a DNA connection. The CPS representative cross-examined each witness, her questions pointed but increasingly less confident. Finally, Judge Harmon addressed Hannah directly. "Young lady, the court would like to hear from you. I understand this is difficult, but your preferences matter in this proceeding." Hannah stood, her small figure somehow dignified despite her obvious fear. "I want to stay with Sheriff Miller and Maddie," she said, her voice steadier than Ethan had expected. "They saved me, not just from the car or from the Prestons, but from being afraid all the time." She took a deep breath. "For a long time, I didn't think I'd ever have a real family again. But now I know what that feels like. Please don't take it away." The courtroom fell silent. Even the CPS representative seemed moved. Judge Harmon studied Hannah thoughtfully, then turned to Ethan. "Sheriff Miller, are you fully aware of the challenges involved in raising this child? The trauma, the ongoing legal proceedings, the special needs you will have?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan answered. "I am. And you are prepared to commit to this responsibility long term? This is not a temporary arrangement we're discussing." "I understand, Your Honor." Ethan's voice was firm. "Hannah belongs with us. We're already a family." Judge Harmon nodded slowly. "I'm prepared to make a preliminary ruling based on the testimony presented and the clear bond already established between the child and petitioner's household. I am granting temporary guardianship to Sheriff Ethan Miller, pending final review in 90 days. She fixed Ethan with a stern look. "I expect regular reports from the child's therapist and from CPS home visits during this period. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Thank you." As they left the courtroom, Hannah practically vibrating with relief beside him, Ethan knew the battle wasn't over. There would be more hearings, more scrutiny, more hurdles to clear. And he still had to find a way to tell Hannah about her connection to Jessica, a truth that would reshape her understanding of herself and how she had come to River Creek. But for now, for this moment, they had won. Hannah was staying, and the shadow that had haunted their lives since that snowy night was beginning, finally, to recede. 1 year later, the Miller house on Oak Ridge Road looked nothing like it had before. The small cabin had been sold, replaced by a rambling farmhouse on 5 acres at the edge of town. The property backed up to national forest land, providing privacy and room to roam. A wooden swing hung from the massive oak in the front yard, and flower beds, Maddie's project, lined the walkway, bursting with spring colors. Ethan stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, watching Scout race across the meadow, Hannah and Maddie chasing after him. The girls' laughter floated back to him on the morning breeze. At 9 and 13, they were still working through their traumas, still had nightmares and setbacks, but those moments came less frequently now, overshadowed by increasingly longer stretches of simple childhood joy. Today marked the anniversary of the judge's final ruling granting Ethan permanent guardianship of Hannah. It had been a long journey to reach that moment. Countless interviews, home visits, psychological evaluations, court appearances. The investigation into the perfect placement program had complicated matters, with defense attorneys suggesting Hannah's testimony might be influenced by her placement with Ethan. But in the end, the evidence of the trafficking ring had been too overwhelming, the bond between Hannah and the Millers too strong to sever. William Preston had received 30 years in federal prison. Richard Holloway, 25. Eleanor Preston was serving a life sentence without possibility of parole, not just for her role in the trafficking network, but for the attempted murder of a law enforcement officer. Piece by piece, the FBI had dismantled the organization, recovering 26 children in total, though an unknown number remained missing, likely transported out of the country before the raids. The doorbell rang, pulling Ethan from his thoughts. Sarah Thompson stood on the porch steps, a gift bag in one hand, Scout's new medication in the other. "Sorry I'm late," she said, stepping inside. "Emergency at the clinic. Mrs. Abernathy's cat got into a fight with a raccoon." "Who won?" Ethan asked, taking her coat. "The raccoon, definitely." Sarah smiled. setting the medication on the counter. How's the patient doing? Scout had torn his ACL chasing a deer 3 weeks earlier. The surgery had been successful, but the recovery required rest, a concept the German shepherd found deeply offensive. Pretending he's not in pain, Ethan replied. Keeps trying to run on it when he thinks I'm not looking. Sarah laughed. Sounds familiar. Some law enforcement types I know have the same. From the living room came the sound of another arrival. Tom's truck pulling into the driveway, followed by the excited voices of the girls welcoming him and his wife, Rebecca. They'd been married 6 months earlier, a quiet ceremony by the lake with Maddie as flower girl and Hannah as junior bridesmaid. The house gradually filled with guests. Agent Carter, now a close friend, Judge Harmon, who had become a surrogate grandmother to girls. Several deputies and their families, neighbors who had embraced the unconventional Miller family, without question. The occasion wasn't just Hannah's guardianship anniversary. It was also a housewarming, a celebration of new beginnings. As conversations flowed around him, Ethan found himself standing before the mantelpiece, gazing at the photographs arranged there. Jessica smiled from the central frame, her eyes bright with a future she'd never see. Beside her photo sat a newer one. Hannah's biological parents, Susan and David Miller, their faces kind and open, so similar to Jessica's. It was astonishing no one had noticed the connection sooner. Telling Hannah about her relation to Jessica had been one of the most difficult conversations of Ethan's life. Her initial shock had given way to a complex mixture of grief and wonder. Grief for the aunt she'd never know, wonder at the cosmic coincidence that had brought her to Jessica's husband and daughter. For Maddie, the revelation that Hannah was her cousin seemed less surprising, as if some part of her had recognized the connection all along. Penny for your thoughts, Sarah said, joining him by the fireplace. Just counting blessings, Ethan replied. Something I never thought I'd do again after Jessica died. Sarah's hand touched his briefly. She would be proud, of all of this. Before he could respond, Hannah called from the kitchen, announcing it was time for cake. The gathering moved to the spacious dining room, where a homemade chocolate cake sat proudly on the table. 13 candles for Hannah, 1 for the year of guardianship. Make a wish, Maddie urged as Hannah prepared to blow out the candles. Hannah paused, looking around at the assembled faces, at her cousin who had once been silent, at the man who had pulled her from fire and chains, at the dog who had stood between her and danger. I don't need to wish, she said softly. I already have everything. Later, as evening settled over the land, the guests departed one by one with hugs and promises to return soon. The girls retreated to their rooms. Hannah to finish a school project, Maddie to read with Scout curled at the foot of her bed, his injury finally convincing him to rest. Ethan stepped onto the back porch, gazing up at the emerging stars. The night was cool but not cold, the scent of pine and new grass carried on a gentle breeze. From inside came the muffled sound of the girls' voices, occasionally rising in laughter or song. A family, not the one he planned, not the one he had lost, but a family nonetheless, forged in fire and struggle and unimaginable courage. He thought of the marble house, now shut down, its elegant rooms empty of suffering children. He thought of the Prestons in Holloway. Their power stripped away, their empire of exploitation crumbled to dust. Justice wasn't perfect. It never was. But it had prevailed where it mattered most. The door opened behind him. Hannah stepped out, wrapped in a sweater too large for her, one of Jessica's that Ethan had kept. We're ready, she said simply. Inside, Maddie had arranged their paper stars on the coffee table, gold foil catching the lamplight. It was their ritual, continued from the cabin, expanded in their new home. Naming something good, adding a star to their constellation. Hannah placed her star first. I'm grateful for truth, she said, even when it's hard. Maddie added hers. I'm grateful for my voice and for people who heard me even when I couldn't speak. Ethan held his star a moment longer, thinking of all they had endured, all they had overcome. I'm grateful for second chances, he said finally, placing his star alongside theirs, and for the family we built together. As they sat in comfortable silence, stars glimmering on the table before them, Ethan knew with certainty that while the past could not be changed, the future was theirs to shape one day, one star at a time. The quiet moments of life, we often reflect on what truly matters. Ethan Miller's journey reminds us that family isn't always what we plan, but what we build through courage and commitment. Like Ethan, many of us have faced unimaginable loss, wondering if happiness would ever return. His story speaks to anyone who has stood at the crossroads of grief and hope, unsure which path to take. The bond between Hannah and Maddie shows us that healing often comes through helping others heal, that our broken pieces can fit together to create something stronger than before. For those who've raised children, biological, adopted, or those who simply needed someone to believe in them, you know the power of being that safe harbor in a storm. Scout's unwavering loyalty reminds us that sometimes the most profound love comes without words. As we age and look back on our lives, it's not our accomplishments that warm our hearts, but the lives we've touched, the souls we've sheltered. Like Ethan's nightly ritual of naming something good, perhaps we too can find stars in our darkest skies, small moments of gratitude that, when connected, illuminate our way forward and remind us we're never too old for second chances. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story.